Good evening, good morrow, and good day, and welcome to another campaign diary and Q&A here on Slice and Dice, talking about everything that went down in the last couple of sessions in the Many Lands campaign. So before we get into that, really should mention one final time about the collaborative stream we had only the other week here on the channel. Thank you everyone who tuned in to support that. It really was great fun. And also a massive thank you to the collaborators involved in our first ever Creative Collab stream here on the channel. There's links to all of their websites, Etsy stores, and the rest of it just on our Twitch page. Go check them out if you haven't done so already. They got some really cool stuff, not just in the pipeline. They've got some stuff already out, a lot of them, that's just really great. Go and check it out. So that's just to name check: Dungeon Masters Workshop, Family Fantasy RPG, Aqua Otter Illustrations, Mad Hat's Cats, and Tabletop Crafter all joined me for the collaborative stream, and it was really nice to kind of take a back seat as a player for a change. Although for those of you familiar with the Cage will know that I sometimes am a player as well as a DM. And in fact, speaking of the Cage, onto kind of the next link, actually. For those of you who haven't done so already, the first two sessions and session 0 of The Cage, as you can see with it there, are on our YouTube. Go check them out. So some of you would have been expecting session 3 to have dropped by now. Due to a little scheduling problem, we haven't been able to actually have session 3 yet. However, that's coming, and I will be releasing it on our YouTube in 2 weeks' time. So we've basically had effectively a week off from that game due to scheduling stuff. But it's coming up. We've got the game scheduled, and so the new episode will be dropping. That's on this day, but in 2 weeks' time. So exactly 2 weeks from now should be when the next session of The Cage drops on the channel. So I will be making a lot of noise about that then, and we'll talk more about that in the campaign diary as well. However, for today, we're going to be talking about sessions 52 and 53 from our flagship campaign, the Many Lands campaign. And boy, reflecting back that it's been over 50 sessions now, and how far our party have come. They're all started at level 1. They're all now level 5. Some of them very, very close to level 6. In fact, I'm pretty sure after next session, a couple of them will be able to level up to level 6. So there's going to be some interesting changes there, at least for one of them that I'm aware of. We'll have an interesting reveal upon leveling. So this could be... some shenanigans could be afoot. Shenanigans really kind of were part of things in sessions 52 and 53. 52 basically being, well, for the most part, it was combat. Our group had woken up from a difficult night's sleep with their long rest, had been interrupted a couple of times by some interesting characters, one of which being the old lady that Leobrin was meant to seek out to give back the crystal ball that the group had found in the lair of the Froglodyte, or the Banderhob as it's otherwise known. As I said, the group have covered a lot of ground over this time. There's been lots of little plots and background plots and, sort of plot lines interweaving, and that's always really nice to see. As I said, in session 52, after that long rest, they were then up in the morning and continuing their travels, but they could see there were more manticores on the horizon, and not just them. This time they were accompanied by Aarakocra from the monastery, from the Eyrie. Now, we've already met a couple of typical monks, Aarakocra monks, being Kerr and Beak, who are leading the party to the Eyrie. They're kind of more of the novices, the kind of apprentice-level monks of the monastery. The guys that the party ended up fighting were a lot more potent swordsmen, as much as anything else, known as the Eyrie Sky Dancers. They're kind of the martial elite of the monastery, and so they posed a significant challenge on their own. But I think the party, I think the players made a good call. I won't say it was the most obvious call in the world, but it was, I would say was a bit of common sense to do so, to try and not kill the Aarakocra. They recognised the Aarakocra were more sort of wards or there's a much fancier word than wards, but essentially they were enslaved under duress. They were fighting against the party because they are beholden to their overlords, the manticores, who have kind of enslaved them at this point. Enthralled, I guess. That's the wrong term. Anyway, so instead they concentrated their fire on the manticores, including some. Well, I mean, there were some crazy rolls in that game. Now, I don't know anyone who has as much luck with the dice as Angelique does, our guest star on the stream at the moment, playing Brina. But that natural 20 with Chromatic Orb was just insane. Now, we even said in the session, I mean, I think Chromatic Orb is a great spell. It provided you have the 50 gold piece diamond, it's a really useful spell. A lot of misconceptions are that that the spell consumes the diamond, and so you only get to use it once, and then the spell's gone. But if you look up spellcasting, if you pay attention to the wording, only spells which say give a material component and then says which the spell consumes would be one that would require the material each time. So with Chromatic Orb, it doesn't say that. It just says you require a diamond. It doesn't say the spell consumes the diamond. So it means you can use that spell more than once, which is, well, really handy because you're going to want to use that more than once as your kind of blasting spell, particularly because it gives you that ownership, it gives you that control, which you may not get with other spells. You get to perform a variety of damage types, so you can kind of cater to, provided you know your enemies a little bit, or you can at least try different damage types to see what has the best effect. So you're playing into vulnerabilities of your opponents. So it's a really potent spell for that. And with a natural 20, with her, meaning she doubled the damage to it, and she cast it at second level, so it would have been 4d8 worth of damage. Instead, with a crit, 8d8 worth of damage, and that basically one-shotted a Manticore. So Chromatic Orb, great spell, good choice. And as I said in the session, it's such a good choice that my wizard character in the cage, Carapticus, also has Chromatic Orb. It's probably his only out-and-out offensive spell, and I feel it's a good choice for that. As I said, the control and the amount of damage, it's a nifty little spell in a pinch. That was a great moment there, and we're still seeing the effects of fake dice. Those of you who may have seen on the board here about #FakeDice, it's basically a feature on our Discord where if you write in under the channel Fake Dice a suggestion for a world event or some other happening, it will be added to our list. Which is 20 long. We have 20 options on Fake Dice at any time, and at a moment that seems appropriate during the campaign, I will roll the Fake Dice, the D20 of Fake Dice, and whichever number it lands on will correspond to the Fake Dice suggestion. So really throws a bit of chaos into the mix. And with Brina, on her first appearance, Fake Dice had it that she would fall in love with, madly and deeply in love with somebody she meets, she interacts with, and through dice rolling, it turned out it was Brucon. And so during session 51, under the influence of her Zone of Truth spell from her nifty but gnarled-looking magical wand, she basically had to admit to Brucon that she was in love with him, which was hilarious, but equally awful and terrible and just so sad. But fair play, it's out in the open now, but she's still kind of feeling the effects despite him not reciprocating and saying, I thank you, but I'm not interested effectively. She still hasn't quite got over that yet. We're getting her to roll charisma saves every once in a while when a significant event happens, or once a day at least, to see if she can overcome, she can have that confidence in herself to move on, and that hasn't happened yet, so it's still under the effects, unfortunately. But also, so after that, Manticore was one-shotted. We then have the rest of the party taking down the other one, being as effective as they usually are in combat. Our group really are good in combat situations. And so if you're the kind of DM that only throws combat at your players, and that's kind of the main focus of your D&D campaign, then this group was going to give you a tough time as a DM, because they're bloody good. They've got their S in order. They know what they're doing, and they know how to play to their strengths. So it gives you a challenge because it means that you have to, if you want to challenge them in combat, you've got to think creatively a bit more about what would be challenging to them. And certainly flying creatures posed a bit of an issue for the party. Family Fantasy RPG says in the chat, but are they overconfident? You know what? Maybe they are. Maybe that, in fact, could be their downfall. And so you can build on that, actually, because I was kind of weirdly going in that direction. You can build on that overconfidence by just giving them some easy fights, lull them into a false sense of security. And I think that's kind of part and parcel of it, particularly if you think in an adventuring day, if you're somebody who throws combat a lot at your characters, it's all about the not the grind. That's kind of got a more negative connotation, but it's about the pacing. Throw different combat encounters at them, but throw repeated encounters, not the same one each time, but just throw more than one. Throw one, then two, then three, because in one day they're going to eventually run out of resource. Obviously, long rests are what most characters want to get their health, and more importantly for spellcasters, get their spells back. So if they don't have that chance to have a long rest, it's only once a day. If they're having multiple combat encounters in the day, by combat 3, they're going to be looking a little bit ropey because you're exhausted on your slots. You're going to be using up your features and abilities that maybe you have limits on them. You may not even have time to short rest, and so fatigue can kind of kick in. I would say I've said the rule of 3, but it's not always 3, and I wouldn't keep it as 3, or else they're going to predict that it's the third one is going to be the difficult one. You need to vary up those numbers. Maybe put a really difficult one in first, so they use more resource in that first fight. Then have an easy one, because even the easy ones are going to be more difficult when the characters are running out of resources. So there's a lot of pacing, and I'd say a little bit of improvisation and changing things up in terms of combats for a combat-strong party like this one. But equally, you can throw non-combat encounters at them as well and just really spice things up and give variety. And I feel that's one thing I really want to do. I would hate for the game to become repetitive by just throwing combat encounters. I don't think the world is like that. I don't think this campaign is like that. There's a lot more going on than just, fighting the bad guys. And we saw that in session 51, actually, with the group having more to negotiate their way out of a situation with the elderly lady who wasn't all what she appeared to be, having some magical powers that were beyond belief, innate spellcasting, which gives the clue that you're not entirely human if you do that. So stuff like that was always good to throw at the party. However, session 52, big old combat encounter. So 2 manticores plus 5 or 6 of these eerie sky dancers. The sky dancers proved to be, I think they were more of a challenge than the manticores were. As it stood, only Brucon was able to bring one of them down in a fist fight, knocking them unconscious. He consciously chose to knock them unconscious. He made a conscious effort not to kill the Aarakocra, and it was a bold but very wise decision, because then as soon as the manticores were slain, the Aarakocra gave up. They didn't want any more to do with this fight. They were only doing it under duress. But that posed a really difficult question for the party. And unfortunately, because Marshall wasn't there, I then had to roleplay as Leobrin, which I don't think Leobrin was as useful as he would have been had Marshall been there. One, I didn't want to kind of override the character, give him more knowledge than he would have being played organically. But equally, I didn't want him to be the star when his player isn't there. That's not fair, and it's not kind of just to the player. So he was more of a backseat role, but kind of giving occasional nudges. Because now the question was, now that these Aarakocra had surrendered, what was to be done with them? Obviously now with the party, should they team up with the party? That's a much larger group, which fair enough is going to be good in a fight, but is going to distract and cause a lot more attention, could bring even more trouble their way. But equally, these Aarakocra, just like Kerr and Beak, are afraid that the manticores are going to send more after them, because if they don't return within a certain time frame, they get hunted down, and that's exactly what they were doing. They were meant to hunt down Kerr and Beak with the manticores, and as soon as they realise that hasn't worked, their necks are going to be on the line as well. Aarakocra, don't forget, from the Eyrie, are leaderless at the moment. They're rudderless. Their leader, the master of the monastery, has gone missing ever since the takeover by the Manticores and the druid that commands them, who's been mentioned once before under the Zone of Truth. As soon as they turned up, the master disappeared. They don't know if the master's been slain or what has happened to them. But they are not at the Eyrie, and so without a leader, these monks, are kind of almost having to fend for themselves. And I take it kind of this flock are not the brightest, really, alone. They kind of are more of I guess a mob mentality, but they need someone at the head, and they're missing that at the moment. So, they were very concerned as to the ramifications of them sticking with the party. And so it was kind of like, well, if they go back without the Manticores, how do they explain that situation away? Is that not going to look a little bit suspicious? Could they maybe fly off and hide somewhere else? Or would that mean that then we've got more Manticores going out looking for them, and it's going to cause even more suspicion, arouse even more suspicion? And so I think in the end, the party toing and froing a bit on what to do with them, but it made sense really to send them back to the Eyrie, and just telling the Manticores that the Manticores that had accompanied them are ravaging the town, or have slain the two they were after, Kerr and Beak. They're dead, and they're off just hunting, perhaps something like that. I think that was the decision they came to. Basically, the Manticores have dealt with the situation, and they're now doing something else, and they've sent the Aarakocra back. That is kind of the line they're going with. I guess it remains to be seen how that will go down, if that'll be well received. Obviously, the players aren't going to know that. The characters aren't going to be aware of that until later on. But it's an interesting question to pose, because if it does work, that means that our heroes now have several pairs of eyes on the inside of the Eyrie, who may be able to help in the fight to come to liberate the Eyrie from these Manticores. It's going to be having a small army on the inside is definitely going to be useful to them. Perhaps it will even, help gain them entry to the Eyrie. We don't know. But one last thing that was teased as the Aarakocra left was that the party will need to traverse the path. As explained later by Kerr and Beak, there is a path leading up to the Eyrie, which all monks who wish to join, all Aarakocra who wish to become monks and join the monastery properly, need to go up this path. And that sounds really simple, but it's actually quite the test. Their wings were clipped back, so they weren't able to fly, meaning they'd have to walk, and would have to face the obstacles and tests along the path. If they pass the tests, they get to the Eyrie, they get to the top, and they are allowed entry inside and are greeted as a fully fledged, pun intended, member of the Eyrie. If they fail the tests, they end up dying, falling from the mountain mostly, as this path kind of winds its way up a steep trail up the mountain. So there's going to be a few tests in store for our heroes if and when they get there. But meantime, Session 53 revealed there's been some other stuff going on. Finally, after 2 months, Marta was available to come back and join the team, meaning that Neris could come back into action. So, just need to take this a little sec. Hydration's important, guys. So now Neris, we could catch up with her and find out what she's been up to. In the meantime, it's been a few days. She's been grieving along with her uncle for the loss of her aunt. And then sort of apprenticing him, learning the trade a little bit through some real oscillating dice rolls, finding not so good with carpentry, and then slightly better in the afternoon. There was a little bit of a swing there, but also getting wind of something more that could be happening and could pose a threat to our heroes. As she was going to get lunch for her uncle from the inn, she noticed, she noticed 3 individuals entering the town. These individuals do not look like your regular townsfolk. These are out-of-town adventuring types. I mean, they were armed, they had scars of battle. They, maybe you could argue maybe a little bit unsavory, maybe a little bit mercenary, perhaps. But let's say morally on the neutral side of things. They looked like they were there for purpose. And Nerys did her best to avoid them, and she did pretty well at that. And instead kind of investigated afterwards where they had come from. She found only from where the horses had been pitched up, she found a peculiar triangular jade coin. She didn't recognise where that was from, but later was identified by Brother Ventrix II that this was a coin from neighbouring Rachir, the Dragonborn kingdom of Rachir. So it's a strange item to find on, none of them being Dragonborn. These three adventurers, 2 humans, 1 male, 1 female, and a dwarf with a slightly green-tinged beard. So some interesting individuals. These characters could prove very interesting for the party next time, where we'll see if they survive the encounter with the party, I guess, as much as anything else. But they could have something interesting to offer, or at least to reveal. And whether they live or die, I will certainly be revealing more about each of those characters in the next campaign diary, because, as much as anything else, I have named those characters now, and I have built... I have done all their stats and everything, so I know a bit, kind of built up their backstory, which I hadn't done in the session, but I have done now. So certainly, if it doesn't get revealed in the game, I will be going through it in the campaign diary, because otherwise it's just a complete waste, and I don't want to waste that effort, It took me a few hours getting all that together, so that will be revealed in the next campaign diary for sure. But yes, anyway, Nerys has got wind that these individuals are seeking out the party, particularly Seth, the rogue, who has a bounty on his head. It hasn't been mentioned for a while, and wanted posters have mostly been removed by Seth when he sees them. But, he started the campaign being arrested and then being a fugitive, escaping from a prison wagon. So, he's eventually going to have to pay the piper in some capacity. He can't keep dodging the law forever. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up going. But these 3 individuals seem interested in him, and appears that perhaps they have come from Calas, which is the kind of the pirate city on the southeastern edge of Burikrin. And it's one that Seth will be familiar with. He has friends there, I guess. He certainly has a ship moored there, which he served aboard and trains with. So he's got ties to Calas, and I guess maybe we'll have a bit more revealed about that. Who knows? We'll see. But so Nerys got wind of that plot, and at first chose to completely ignore it, because you know what? She's got her own stuff going on. Moody teenager wants to get on with her own life and focus on herself. And also she had a moral obligation to attend to, because she had promised the rest of the party that she would keep an eye on the 2 lycanthropes, because let's not forget another of these plots that hasn't quite been tied up yet, that after the werewolf ball, the party managed to save 2 guests who had been bitten and transformed into werewolves during when the moon strikes. Doesn't have to be a full moon, but when the moon light shines, it can cause these individuals to turn into werewolves. So these 2, Greta Grouse of Loranlas, a sort of noble lady from the Forest Nation, noble elven lady from the Forest Nation, whose husband tragically was killed at the werewolf ball, and Captain Hugh Mandeville, a sort of military type, or at least from a military background, lordling from Burikrin, who also was saved by the party, and at one point couldn't come to terms with his lycanthropy and tried to take his own life. It was only my words today. Basically, if it wasn't for the if it wasn't for Brucon stepping in and interfering, and talking him down, he most certainly would have taken his life. So it was, both these characters have had some stuff going on and some stuff to talk about. And so Nerys was going to check in on them as they were staying in the temple, because Brother Ventrix could offer prayers to them and some shelter, unbeknownst to the rest of the town, because you don't want the town knowing that there are other werewolves knocking around, since one has already been loosed earlier on and slayed a town's member. So the party needed to keep an eye on them, but they also needed to stop this whole plot with the red mages, and it seems that these Aarakocra and the Manticores are somehow related to that. At least that's their suspicion anyway. To stop these people being abducted from the town. So it had that moral obligation. So they left Nerys behind because, one, she wanted to grieve, and two, she could keep an eye on things. And so when she went to go to the temple that evening, she heard a scream from Greta, ran up there, and found that Q Mandeville had been slain. He turned into a werewolf, and before he could strike Brother Ventrix, the deacon, Brian Obadiah, stepped in and using his sort of clerical powers, had unfortunately, tragically, had to kill the beast. Which means, so bless this guy. He's just been serving under a priest for several years, and finally the apprentice, he gets to step in and help, but with dire results. And Hugh Mandeville is now dead. So Nerys kind of comes up to find the aftermath of this, and then also notes that these guys are being kept in a temple which has windows, and therefore moonlight can get in. Perhaps they need to build some kind of shelter within the temple that then can house the Greta, the now one remaining werewolf, in, so that the moonlight will not be able to hit her, because if she feels there's a little bit of an oversight. Hello, should be studying. Thanks for tuning in. Just catching up on everything that's happened in the last couple of episodes. So Nerys, commented, why haven't you hidden these werewolves away somewhere else? There was no good answer to that, aside from obviously this old temple. They don't have the tools necessary to be able to craft a small sort of lean-to inside to hide her in. So happily, maybe happily is the wrong word, but Nerys knows her uncle Brynlan, who is a carpenter. Therefore, he can build a little shelter within the temple. Obviously, he doesn't know yet that there are werewolves being kept in the temple, but I'm sure Nerys would be able to negotiate with him for that. And actually, it proved quite easy in the end, after Nerys decided to spend the evening at the temple, just to make sure no more accidents happened, or make sure nobody else turned into a werewolf or got killed. Wakes up in the morning and heads back to her uncle's, to the workshop, and finds the workshop has been ransacked and Brynlan has been beaten up, as it turns out, by the same 3 adventurers who came into town yesterday looking for Nerys amongst the rest of the party. So Brynlan tells Nerys what happened, that he wasn't going to give up her location, and pointed them out of town towards where the rest of her friends were going, roughly, because he didn't know exactly where, but said, they're off that way. They left in that direction, leaving the adventurers sort of left him be, although beat him up considerably. Went off to find the rest of the party, and leaving Nerys in a not a great position, really, because that means she's now far behind the rest of the group, and she doesn't have the facility to be able to warn them of what's coming. Unlike Malar, who can just cast sending and can just relay a message to her from great distances, she doesn't have that facility, so it proved a bit of an issue. However, her uncle does have a horse, Louse, who is in no way is influenced or a homage to Roach from The Witcher. No, that's definitely not a thing. The black mare that he keeps out the back of the workshop has basically given given the horse to Nerys so that she can speedily catch up with the party, possibly with these 3 individuals as well, because they're going to need her help. And she knows what's coming, the rest of them don't. So should anything happen, she may be able to intervene. Before she went, of course, finding her uncle beaten, she needed to get him fixed, get him healed. So she took him to the temple, where Brother Ventrix could then perform some healing magic on him, which also handily means that, he's going to be a lot more receptive to maybe building a little shelter inside the Temple of Spark, just to, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That's kind of a quid pro quo, it's a term that's been thrown around quite a lot this year over here anyway, for better or worse. But yeah, so it's something else that they can throw, and worked out surprisingly well in the end, happily kind of coming together. It's nice when those things tie together. So then, Nerys left town, got all her stuff together, and sped out the town to try and catch up with her friends and warn them of the dangers that were approaching. The rest of the party, meanwhile, after defeating the Manticores and setting the Aarakocra free, they continued with Kerr and Beak and their new friend Brina on towards the road and towards the Eyrie. As far as they're aware, they're all heading the right direction. They can see it on the horizon. It's still some way to go, and before they get there, they have to cross the main road that cuts across that area through Birukrin towards Rachir. Actually, the road actually does wind into the mountains eventually, but where they're crossing it is in the foothills, still before the mountains. It was also noted by the elderly lady, or as she is otherwise been called, the witch, to Leobrin, that her caravan was left by that road as well. And sure enough, it was there, plain as day, in the open, despite the rain. It's been stormy weather for the party today. They found the caravan, and more than they were expecting. Leobrin had been told that there was a pearl. He was meant to find that pearl, and that would be the first test, or part of the test anyway, to see whether he would be worthy of having his powers fixed. He's having some problems, as was touched on. Well, it's kind of another thing that's been going on that most of the party aren't aware of, but I would say that Leobrin most certainly is, due to his patron, the Lady Aranth First Blooming of the Feywild, of the Spring Court. Her powers are waning inexplicably. There are reasons for this. Reasons that were caused by the party, kind of, and other entities that they may have done deals with, has caused this problem. And so they, although they don't know this, so Leobrin has been wanting to get his powers back, because at the moment he's sometimes having faltering issues. That's what I've been getting Marshall to roll a d20 when he goes to cast a leveled spell. As we know, warlocks only get very limited spell slots. For most levels, it's 2 spell slots per short rest rather than long rest. But each time he casts a leveled spell, he has to roll the d20. And if he rolls low, the spell fails. If he rolls high, it succeeds. So it's like, so he still uses the spell slot sometimes. But so it can be a complete waste for him sometimes. He's having a real issue. He's having some real performance issues at the moment, that warlock. So the offer to basically have his powers renewed certainly would be tempting. I know I would be tempted in that situation. So it's he happily has went to the caravan, searched and eventually retrieved the pearl through some help by the 12 pixies that had been captive in these tiny little cages attached to the caravan. Of course, Leobrin, being the good and heroic type that he is, went to save these pixies, also noting that they were denizens of the Feywild too, and they were from, would you believe it, the Spring Court. So, with their Lady Hedera Crowned Green, otherwise known as Lady Aranth's mother, who is also she's also the leader of the Spring Court, Leobrin set them free and said, put in a good word for me, essentially. Very sappy. I hope that works out well for him anyway, because he wants to ultimately, part of Leobrin's backstory is that he wants to prove that he is worthy of the powers that he has, and to prove it to his patron, he also wants to do right by his patron, who he also got pregnant, got knocked up. So, yeah, complicated stuff for that half-elf warlock. Getting your patron pregnant, that's one way to get powers, right? So, it's a difficult time for him, but finds the pearl, sets the pixies free. Seems like the right thing to do. Was it part of the test all along? That is the question. That's one of the things the rest of the group were pondering about this when they were suddenly surprised by Nibbles the rat, who has been missing for some time. They assumed he was with Nerys, but Nibbles is a rat, and a sneaking rat at that. And a very intelligent rat. While he'd stowed away in the Oberyn's backpack, he'd actually been deciphering the tome which Leobryn had been carrying, which they had also found at the same time as the crystal ball in the lair of the Froglodyte. So he revealed that the tome actually belonged to an alchemist who, it seems, was tricked by a witch, kind of similar to the description. A similar circumstance to what the rest of the party, to what Leobryn has come across with this elderly lady. Similar circumstance. He was cursed by this witch and was turned into that monster, into the Froglodyte. So, probably not somebody you want to cross, unless you want the same thing to happen to you, right? What were the pixies part of the test? Was finding the pearl part of the test? Was it all part of the test? Was none of it part of the test? These witchy types work in mysterious ways, so I guess we'll find that out in time. I won't reveal too much right now, but it's not the last that Leobryn's seen of that lady, that's for sure, or her sisters, all three of them. So they took care of that, and happily they have now, in for a penny, in for a pound. May have caused some problems by letting those pixies free, so they decided, the party, to instead take the whole caravan. It means that with Seth using his sailor knotting skills, being able to attach his horse to the caravan, as it was actually designed more to be held by a person and dragged along, sort of like a tuk-tuk or something. No, it's like a rickshaw. Apologies, like a rickshaw, essentially, to be towed across. But he, has now repurposed it so that it can be drawn by a horse instead. So it means that while the horse is being led with the carts, those sitting in the carts can then have a short rest, which is beneficial for some of our party. Weirdly, Leobryn wasn't one of the people to short rest, even though warlocks short rests are really important. As they are for monks. So you can only fit so many in the cart, I guess. So there you have it. But they've continued en route and noted that as they've crossed the road and ended up continuing, they're getting very close to the mountains now. But this last bit before the mountains, the earth seems to be it's lost all of its kind of floral, all the grass has kind of given way, and instead of this flora, it's now just kind of mud and salt, and it's kind of got that kind of dandruffy look, almost, as I said in the stream, of the landscape ahead. The kind of salt flat, essentially, and they also then find later on a lake. It's a salt lake. So that's an indicator that they are close to the mountains as well. That you're getting that surface runoff of rain that then spills into, because geography, got to look these things up, right? So you're getting this surface runoff from the mountains that are then pooling in these indents in the ground. This large indent, and then that makes a natural lake and a salt lake, because the water can't go anywhere. It's just plateaus there. And so it kind of erodes the ground around it, and that's what causes these salt flats. Those of you who know more about geography than me, feel free to correct me, but from my understanding, that's how it works. So that is how that lake has been formed. The group decided that the lake there was a good place for them to pull over, as I say, and stop, because Seth had spotted in the dew, in the light rain, some way behind them, that they were being followed by 3 figures on horseback. I wonder who they could be. But little do those people, little do those people know, they're also being followed, maybe a little way back, by our missing Neris. So it's going to be a really fun reunion, I hope, for the party, and whatever goes down at this lake. There's sure to be a confrontation of some kind, but will it end in bloodshed? It's possible. Maybe not, though. Maybe not. Maybe not everyone will die on one side, perhaps. Might be nice. But there may be other surprises in store. Not just these three figures who are approaching them, but what else lies on the path, and what lies on the path up the mountain as well. The tests of which the Aarakocra have spoken of. I'll be talking more about that in the next campaign diary, because I think, as much as anything else, our group should have overcome at least some of the tests by then. But I'll certainly be talking more about tests, test building, and trap building in the next session. But for now, I think, a little bit of geography, just that little top tip for world building. If you want to build your world, you don't have to subscribe to the rules of physics, the laws of nature. You don't have to subscribe to things as they are in the real world. You can, of course, go anywhere you like with your world. It's your world after all. You can make gravity work in a different way. You could get rid of gravity altogether if that's what you choose to do. I find for my settings to kind of, I say my settings, this is my only setting, to be clear. But for DMing, I find, for the most part, I like to keep some rules the same as in real life, but to help with immersion, to kind of get you in quicker as a player. So up is up and down is down, rather than having to explain all that, just assuming these things. And I also like to research into geographical locations, into types of terrain, things like that, because I think it helps me as a DM describe as well as a storyteller. It's going to help me to narrate and paint a picture for the players. And certainly with this Salt Lake idea, it was something that I researched into, and it just made complete sense. I was trying to work out how these lakes formed in real life, and then applied that to in the game world as well. And it meant that I learnt a little as well. And learning is never a bad thing. So I would say for your campaigns, if you're looking to create your own encounters or your own terrain or whatever, even if you're not actually, and you're working from a module, but it's always helpful to look stuff up. And if you've got the time available, which a lot of people do this year, then do look into these things, because you never know what you can find. You never know what inspiration you'll find from looking something up. I think when I was looking up the lake, I was looking up for something completely different. I think I was looking more into rivers and that sort of thing, and happened across those kind of natural lakes, and thought, no, that's a really cool idea. Let's go with that. It's also helpful for when you're building your own monsters as well. As well as taking stuff from the monster manual and adapting it to kind of put your own spin on existing monsters. If you want to, especially if you're going for beasts, for instance, which are mostly based on animals from the real world, look into how those animals behave. Look into different, say, for instance, with dogs, look into different, or wolves, look into different species, look into different areas that they may appear, different habitats, different locations. Just anything like that can really help give you some inspiration for your games, and kind of really give yourself that genuine edge, gives you that conviction when you're describing to your players. So like describing the Salt Lake, the Salt Plains, should I say, the Salt Fields. Had I not research that, first of all, I wouldn't be calling it a salt field. I wouldn't be making any of those references whatsoever. But the fact that I looked it up, and I could not only say that, in fact, I don't think I said it was a salt field. I didn't want to give that away in game, but then I could describe the what it looked like with conviction. I seem to remember making the comparison, like it's like being peppered with salt, or it looks like it looks almost like dandruff across earthy terrain. And I seem to remember one of the players being like, "What?" And then one of the others, I think it was Bart, who plays Brucom, then said, "Oh no, I've seen those. I know exactly what you mean." Because I had, because now I had looked into that, I knew it was a thing, and it made sense. So little things like that really, I think, give you a confidence boost in your session, really help you paint that picture and really immerse your players more into your game. It seems like a little thing, I know, describing the ground in a scene, but you'd be surprised what an impact that will make. Anything that you pay particular attention to in your description, the players pick up on because they believe it will be important, because else why would you be describing it so elaborately? Unless, you're, for instance, a Matt Mercer type who describes everything in great detail and makes it sound really interesting. That's fine. That's great. Wish I could do that all the time. I just don't have the knowledge sometimes to be able to reel off those kind of elaborate descriptions. But it really, as would be demonstrated, I'd say Matt Mercer is a great example. It brings that immersion because you can really see, you can really visualize that scene in front of you. And that's such a big thing as an actor and as a player, to be able to see what you're interacting with, to bring that world to life. I think one last thing before I go today, I would say on that, and it's one thing I'd like to bring in more, I keep forgetting to do in the heat of the moment. You know what? Bring in insects. Not just flies buzzing around a corpse. Well, yes, that too, but like bees pollinating flowers, or you feel you see the ground after the rainstorm has subsided and earthworms wriggling amongst the grass roots, something like that. Just little things like that. I think it's true of many things in life. It's the little things that make the biggest impact. I think I'll leave it there for today. But as I said, to recap, The Cage will be back 2 weeks' time. There's no session on Monday this week, no Manyland session, I'm afraid, because I'm not available. I know. Having a life in 2020, what is this? I had other work to do, unfortunately. But we will be back in 2 weeks' time for the Manylands as well. And there will be something else dropping on Friday. This coming Friday. So this time next week, I will have something dropping onto our YouTube. Go and check it out. Unless there are real technical issues, which I really hope there aren't, it will be our second ever Don't Believe the Hype. If you don't know what Don't Believe the Hype is, our first Don't Believe the Hype, all about the Ranger, is on our YouTube channel. It basically is kind of a countercultural approach, taking these things that are maybe given a bad press by the community as a whole, by the D&D community as a whole, should I say, and kind of putting a more positive spin on them, offering the other side of the coin. And the Ranger is the class that gets the most abuse online for being the worst class. So it seemed like a natural place for me to start Don't Believe the Hype. Equally, I've played a Ranger at least 3 times, and it's one of my favorite classes, so I had to kind of put that on there basically and offer that counter opinion. So this next one that will be going up, as I said, hopefully next Friday, is all about another this time a subclass that's often given a bad name, and one of which I have been playing and will one day be playing on the stream as well, or at least in one of our campaigns on the channel. And that is the 4 Elements Monk, as voted for by our subscribers on our subscriber Discord channel. That's right. If you subscribe to Slice and Dice here on Twitch, you also get, as well as the emotes, the subscriber discount on our merch store, and all the other goodies. You also get your own exclusive Discord channel on the Slice and Dice server. So our subscribers on there voted for out of a number of different subclasses, and we have finally decided on the 4 Elements Monk for the next Don't Believe the Hype. So if you want to know more about that subclass, the only spellcasting monk that there is, proper spellcasting monk there is, and you want to find out more about it, or maybe find an opinion that's not just it's terrible, don't use it, check out Don't Believe the Hype, coming to YouTube, fingers crossed, next Friday. Anyway, until then, guys, have a great weekend. Thank you so much for stopping by. And as I said, stay safe.